Police Chief Peter Slowly says his department is launching what he calls a surge and contain strategy, deploying another 150 officers to patrol downtown neighborhoods, tightening access to streets around Parliament Hill, what Slowly calls the red zone.
We'll be further isolating and containing the demonstration in that red zone, utilizing concrete barriers, heavy equipment barricades, to create no-access roadways throughout the downtown core.
Police expect as many as 400 more trucks and between 1,000 and 2,000 protesters to arrive in Ottawa this weekend. Police say they'll be directing protest vehicles away from downtown and are prepared to shut down highway ramps and interprovincial bridges into the city if needed. Ottawa's Mayor Jim Watson says he's glad to see police taking a firmer stance. The protesters, he says, have worn out their welcome.
The public are seeing acts of vandalism. They're seeing harassment of individuals, particularly women and people of color. And this is just not acceptable in a civil society.
Watson has spoken to Federal Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino, who has agreed to provide the city with more RCMP officers and resources.
Thank you so much for coming out. Really appreciate you being here.
Meanwhile, a small group of frustrated downtown residents today joined with city councillors like Sean Menard on a walk through parts of the protest site.
We're not confronting anybody. We're going to be making sure that people are not getting harassed today.
Protesters in the truckers' convoy say they know blocked streets and blaring horns are enough to get on anyone's nerves, but they're not going anywhere.
I can understand. They're angry and they're upset, and I probably would be if I was in this neighborhood too. But we've all suffered for the last 2 years.
So I respect it. I wouldn't want it by my house, but we're here for their kids too.
And so the protest continues. And while Ottawa's police chief says his force is hardening its position, one thing he could not give today was a timeline for when the demonstrators and their trucks would be gone. Tom Perry, CBC News, Ottawa.
Other convoy groups are assembling or planning to assemble in different parts of the country. Manitoba, Quebec, and Ontario are looking at what could be a weekend of noisy demonstrations. We have reporters in all three provinces tonight. We start in Quebec City, where the first group of truckers has arrived. Justin Hayward is outside the National Assembly. Justin.
Protesters here are waving flags. They're waving Quebec and Canadian flags inscribed with the word freedom or liberté. Only a few trucks are actually parked here. Police have been forcing others to keep moving. The road that passes in front of Quebec's National Assembly is blocked by 3 large street cleaning trucks. Local authorities moved them in yesterday, and they're forcing demonstrators to walk to a spot in front of the legislature, which also happens to be next to the ice castle built for Quebec's Winter Carnival, opening this weekend. Police are everywhere. The municipal and provincial governments say no siege or vandalism will be tolerated. Mayor Francois Legault says there are plenty of tow trucks if things get out of hand. The protesters here, like across the country, have a wide range of grievances, with one that unites them: an end to all pandemic restrictions and mandates. Carnival obviously is a huge tourist draw for the city, and the opening this year coincides with the easing of several restrictions. This is the first weekend restaurants have been allowed to reopen, for example. Restaurant and hotel owners are saying instead of the busy weekend they've been looking forward to, they're now dealing with cancellations as word of the protest spreads. Tom?
Thanks, Justin. That's Justin Hayward in Quebec City. A big truckers' protest in Winnipeg got underway earlier today in frigid temperatures. But at least the sentiments expressed were mild. Cameron McIntosh is there. Cam.
Hey, Tom. Well, big trucks are making some big noise here in downtown Winnipeg, but the protest itself isn't all that big. It's confined to the area directly in front of the Manitoba legislature, and it's cold. There's a wind chill that feels like minus 30. Still, there are people out here calling on the provincial government to repeal COVID health restrictions. They're waving flags and signs. It looks a bit and sounds a bit similar to what we've seen and heard in Ottawa, but it doesn't have the same tension. Traffic is passing through and the mood is lighter. Organizers say they want a festive protest. Christian Belland is one of the people here. He says he's had COVID and is upset he's being told to get vaccinated. He decided to bring his 3 kids to make a point.
I feel like I need to bring my family down and not sit at home and watch TV. And I felt like as a Canadian, I need to be here. Like I was so excited to wake up in the morning and just be here.
they'll stay here until all the restrictions are reduced. The mayor and the police chief both say they're monitoring this and they are concerned about the noise. But in the end, Tom, it might be the cold that really determines how big and how long this lasts.
All right, Cam, the CBC's Cameron McIntosh in Winnipeg. Of course, the truckers' convoy is still on the way to Toronto. Organizers have been warned the city will be ready. We get more on that from Philip Leishanock.
Here in Toronto, police are watching what's happening in Ottawa and elsewhere, and they're planning for when protesters roll into town. Already 2 oversized buses are parked to block streets north and south of the provincial legislative buildings. That's a destination for tomorrow's protest. Now, police say they'll allow the truckers to park, but only in designated areas and nowhere near Queen's Park. Now, one reason is just south of the legislature is so-called Hospital Road. Half a dozen hospitals, including the country's leading pediatric, cancer, and research hospitals, are all within a few blocks. Now, Toronto Police Chief James Raymer says keeping that area secure is paramount.
We will make every attempt to facilitate peaceful assembly. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we protect the public, we protect our emergency services, we protect our hospitals. And given some of the information that we've received, we feel that these steps are appropriate.
Along with roadblocks, police are setting up portable closed-circuit security cameras, and the extra police called in have orders to wear their body cameras and have them running.
All right, thanks, Phil. The CBC's Philip Leishanock in Toronto. It's not just cities seeing protests. We've also been tracking the border blockade near the village of Coutts, Alberta, all week. Demonstrators promised to move on yesterday, but they changed their minds and stayed put, allowing some traffic through. Locals say the very protest that's disrupting their lives and livelihoods is one they actually support. Aaron Collins has the story.
A grain truck fills a long trough at dryland feeders near Warner, Alberta. This cattle feeding business is aptly named. A drought this summer means feed in these parts is scarce.
I don't think any time in history, in this industry, I've only been in it 20 years, have we been at this spot where we're hand to mouth day after day after day, and it keeps the guy up at night.
Jacob Buchert brings a steady stream of feed trucks from states every day just to make ends meet. But not this week. The blockade at the border means those trucks have stopped rolling.
It just sucks that I'm kind of an innocent bystander in a way, is that we're not getting the grain that we need.
Buchert doesn't like the impact the blockade's having on his business, but like most in this part of Alberta, he supports the goals of the protesters, an end to COVID restrictions and a return to the way things were.
We've done what we've been asked, and we just don't want to do it anymore.
Just to the south in the village of Coutts, some trucks have pulled out of town, easing the blockade that's been there for nearly a week. Mayor Jim Willett says most here support the protest, despite the impact it has on them.
It's not just hard on my residents, it's hard on the small farmer and people who have to ship across this border.
Willett says he'd like to see the trucks move on, and on Thursday there was hope that they might. But protesters were convinced to stay by supporters, including this Calgary pastor.
Thousands upon thousands of people are coming. They don't have enough RCMP officers to deal with that.
Right.
They don't have enough army to deal with that.
Right.
Remember, you have the power now.
Shared on social media, these words hit home in this part of Alberta, a place where God and personal freedom trump even cattle and oil.
God has given us this moment in history.
So instead of protesters driving off, many are digging in. Some at this new blockade to the north near the town of Milk River.
Where am I, brother? He's right beside you.
Marco Van Hugebos is one of the main organizers of these blockades. He's also a town councillor in nearby Fort Macleod. This kind of action gets votes around here.
This movement is snowballing. You've seen the effects.
Van Hugebos knows this blockade is hard on many in the area, but he said it's a sacrifice worth making.
I know, even for myself, there has been a cost. And that cost increases. So I sympathize, but this movement trumps any kind of dollar.
It's that commitment that has stumped the RCMP. How do you stop a protest that seems to grow, even as it hurts its supporters? The real worry for authorities here, you can't. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Milk River, Alberta.
The convoy in Ottawa has been camped out downtown for a full week now. In that time, the noise and disruption to residents, workers, and businesses in the area has not stopped. We've also seen Confederate flags, swastikas there. The right to protest is enshrined in Canada's Constitution. But what are the limits? David Thurton explores that question.
Every February, I normally rise to encourage parliamentarians and Canadians to celebrate Black History Month. These are not normal times.
Greg Fergus, one of the co-chairs of the Federal Black Parliamentary Caucus, on his feet in the House of Commons, reminding MPs the Confederate flag, at least one of which was flown at the protests in Ottawa on Saturday, was a symbol of slavery and why it should be condemned.
Even after 188 years since the abolition of slavery in Canada, in some people's eyes, I am not equal, nor should I be free.
Today, though, Fergus and a group of Black MPs and senators are calling for more than just enunciations. They've issued 3 demands, including that Parliament pass legislation banning such hateful symbols. They want to probe into the Freedom Convoy protests, and they're also calling for more scrutiny over online fundraising platforms.
I call this meeting to order.
Something the House of Commons Public Safety Committee has unanimously supported. The truck convoy has raised more than $10 million through GoFundMe, though both the fundraising campaign and the funds have been frozen. GoFundMe did this out of heightened due diligence, which truck convoy organizers say they welcome. But Alistair McGregor, the NDP critic for public safety, is concerned the money could be used to support domestic white supremacist terrorism.
We have seen some very concerning fringe elements take advantage of this protest to promote their own extremist and hateful ideology.
None of these measures, though, will bring an end to the idling trucks belching toxic fumes into the air in downtown Ottawa, or the noise. Constitutional lawyer Sujit Chaudhry says there are enough grounds for the city and provincial governments to get a court injunction to stop the noise, the blocking of traffic, if not the whole protest.
The fact that it's widespread and that it's ongoing, there's no sign of an end, those all combined are, I think, evidence that the government could use to go to court to try to bring this under control.
But organizer Tamara Lick said yesterday at a news conference, there's a faster and easier way to end it all.
Let me assure the people of Ottawa that we have no intent to stay one day longer than necessary.
She says the Prime Minister should do what's right and end vaccine mandates. David Thurton, CBC News, Ottawa.
Into the pandemic, many of us have learned to live with restrictions. The Premier's held a news conference today to discuss what the future of COVID-19 may look like. Here's Alberta's Jason Kenney.
We have to learn to live with COVID, and we have to change. Our response to COVID has to change as the nature of the disease changes. Of tools that maybe were relevant 18 months ago as we go into with a population 90% first dose vaccination.
Have lifted restrictions. It's time for life to return to normal. That is here. Next day, taking our foot off the gas now is still more trouble down the road. Christine Mira, that's more.
Pandemic uncertainty is exhausting. Innovation is racing towards any